are the Beatitudes, the Magi following a star, turn the other cheek. These iconic moments of Christianity all come from one gospel, Matthew. It's been the most popular gospel since the 2nd century. But here's the paradox that haunts biblical scholarship. The same text, the most Jewish of all 4 gospels, became the primary weapon for centuries of Christian anti-Semitism. How can one document be both? On one side, Matthew anchors Jesus deeply in Jewish scripture, tradition, and identity. On the other, passages from this gospel justify persecution, pogroms, and the violence against Jewish communities for over 1,000 years. That tension isn't a bug. It's the key to understanding Matthew. Matthew shapes Christianity's most recognizable imagery, the birth narrative with Joseph's dream, the star in the east, the Magi bringing gifts, Herod's paranoia, the flight to Egypt, the slaughter of innocents, all Matthew. The Beatitudes exist in Luke too, but Matthew's version is what people quote. Turn the other cheek appears in both Gospels, but Matthew owns it culturally. The early church placed Matthew first in the New Testament canon precisely because of this popularity. These aren't random stories. They're carefully constructed theological arguments. Look at Matthew's opening line. The book of the Genesis of Jesus Christ, son of David, son of Abraham. And the Greek word Genesis deliberately echoes the Hebrew Bible's first book. Son of David signals royal lineage, Israel's great king. Son of Abraham invokes the father of the Jewish people. From the very first sentence, Matthew announces, this story belongs to Israel's story. Every genealogy, every prophecy citation, every scriptural echo serves one purpose, proving Jesus fulfills Jewish hope. And this isn't a text written against Judaism, it's written from within it. Understanding Matthew requires 2 rabbinic concepts, Haggadah, stories about great figures that convey moral and theological lessons, Yeloah, Halakha, practical teachings on how to live daily life. Matthew's infancy narrative is a Haggadah on Moses. Watch the parallels. Right? An evil king wants to kill the baby, Pharaoh in Exodus, Herod in Matthew. The child miraculously survives. There's a journey involving Egypt. The child is called out of Egypt. Later, the teacher delivers law from a mountain. Sinai for Moses, the Sermon on the Mount for Jesus. Matthew presents Jesus as a new Moses using traditional Jewish storytelling techniques. This Haggadah technique explains Matthew's constant refrain. This happened to fulfill what was written by the prophet. Modern readers sometimes hear this as proof texting, cherry-picking verses to support a conclusion. But for Matthew's Jewish audience, this was sophisticated theological argument. Every fulfillment citation says Jesus makes sense only within Israel's story. The scriptures aren't being hijacked. They're being claimed as the interpretive key to understanding who Jesus is. So if Matthew is so Jewish, how did it become a weapon against Jews? Start with the Pharisees. Matthew repeatedly calls them hypocrites, the blind guides, the whitewashed tombs. This language is so embedded in Western culture that English dictionaries literally define Pharisee as a hypocritical person. But the Pharisees are the ancestors of rabbinic Judaism, the tradition that produced the Talmud and shaped modern Jewish practice. The Rabbi Gamaliel in Acts is a Pharisee, and he appears positively in Jewish texts. Matthew's attacks aren't neutral description. They're polemic from an intra-Jewish debate that got frozen into scripture. The most devastating example appears in Matthew 27. Pilate wants to release Jesus. The crowd responds, his blood be upon us and upon our children. This single verse became the theological foundation for the Deicide charge, the accusation that Jews killed God. Deicide means killing of a god. Throughout medieval Europe, this charge justified persecution, forced conversions, and mass violence. Passion plays reenacting this scene triggered pogroms. The verse was treated as a historical transcript. the Jewish people collectively accepting guilt for all generations, but this is Matthew's literary construction, serving his narrative purposes, not a court record. Here's the mechanism that transformed family argument into external weapon. In the first century, Jewish Christians and Pharisees argued within the same community. It's an internal debate, sharp, sometimes bitter, but among people who share fundamental commitments. By the 4th century, Jewish Christians had been absorbed into a larger Gentile church. The context disappeared. Medieval Christians read Matthew's critiques not as one Jewish group criticizing another, but as Christians versus Jews. The more Jewish the text, the sharper its internal critiques, which became weapons when outsiders read them without context. This pattern, internal critique becoming external weapon, appears throughout history. When you encounter harsh language about the Jews or Pharisees in Matthew, recognize it as intra-community polemic, not condemnation from outside. The author isn't attacking a foreign religion. Right? He's arguing with relatives about the family inheritance. Understanding this doesn't excuse how the text was used. It doesn't undo centuries of violence, but it changes how we read. Ancient texts carry meanings that authors never intended when read by different audiences in different contexts. Next time you hear the Beatitudes, remember you're encountering the most Jewish gospel. When you see a nativity scene with Magi and a star, that's Matthew's Haggadah on Moses. When someone uses Pharisee as an insult, that's 1st century polemic frozen into modern prejudice. Matthew wanted to prove Jesus was the fulfillment of Jewish hope. His very success at making that Jewish case was twisted into a weapon against the Jewish people. The text didn't change, the readers did, and readers always bring their own contexts. Understanding this paradox doesn't resolve it. Matthew remains both the most authentically Jewish gospel and a source of tremendous harm. Holding both truths simultaneously is uncomfortable. It should be. That discomfort is the beginning of reading ancient texts responsibly, not to excuse, not to condemn, but to understand how meaning travels across centuries and transforms along the way.